Good morning. Welcome back to Flawed Dogs. We last left them. It was a good one. Sam the lion was looking down the barrel of Uncle Hamish's shotgun because they think he tried to take baby Bruno and hurt him. So we'll see, huh? Chapter 15, Men. Sam opened his eyes to see Hamish looking down at him with a tortured look. He lay in snow between two large roots extending from a huge fig tree. His head hurt less now, but he still couldn't stand up. Hamish held his rifle to his chest, his fingers tightening on the stock, turning white from the cold. He swung the barrel toward the dachshund and held it there, his hands shaking. With the other hand, he wiped the falling snow from his eyes awkwardly. "I don't understand what has happened," said Sam weakly. "Why is everyone afraid of me?" Hamish listened to the faint sounds coming from the animal he fully expected would one day be the most famous and celebrated show dog in the world, but who now lay before him as a wounded, fatally sick creature from whom he needed to protect his family. His robe was still around Sam, and Hamish began shaking from cold. He dropped the rifle muzzle and put a palm to his eyes, drying the moisture, angry. Then he pulled a large piece of tamarack bark over to Sam and laid it across the two roots, making a sort of roof over the dog. He tucked the folds of material around him, being careful not to get near Sam's mouth, which he still believed carried a dangerous disease that had made the small dachshund go mad. Hamish had instinctively grabbed his phone before running from the house. He pulled it from the pocket of the robe tucked around Sam and made a call. "Sheriff, it's Hamish McLeod. Yes, I know what time it is. Just listen. Call animal control and tell them that there's a dog that needs picking up on my property. He's sick, crazy, tried to harm one of my own. I winged him, but he's still alive. No, I can't finish it. You need to fetch him and do whatever needs doing. He's under the big fig tree next to my eastern gate. They can't miss him. He's wrapped in my bathrobe. Yes, you heard me." So there's Uncle Hamish walking away with Sam tucked under the tree. Hamish closed the phone and looked down at the unmoving dog, breathing hard, looking back at him. He swung the rifle up toward the sky and fired at once, the blast echoing through the hills and making Sam flinch. "She'll need to hear that," Hamish said. "She'll need to know it's over." He trailed off. He pulled his pajama collar high around his neck and leaned over Sam, looking into his eyes for the last time. He whispered, "You'll be warm, Sam." Hamish looked up into the sky and then back down, pain written on his face. "Thank you for bringing me back to Heidi." He turned and disappeared into the curtain of snow. Sam rested, panting. He licked some snow, moistening his dry mouth, and then ate some ice. The robe's warmth was soothing, and he closed his eyes, trying hard not to think more about this day of horror and madness. He was more tired than he had ever been in his short life, and was only dimly aware when other men arrived, and he felt himself being lifted and carried through the trees. He was even less aware of being placed into a metal box in a truck, and the door closing with darkness once again falling upon him. Chapter 16, Lassie. Several hours later, the light returned to Sam like drapes in a black room, opening very slowly. After a few moments, he remembered that his heart was broken. Things were blurred, shadowy, wet. Wet, thought Sam. He was being kissed all over his face. Licked. Slowly, the face on the other end of the oddly rough tongue doing the licking came into focus, inches from his. She was beautiful. A miniature greyhound, maybe, of exquisitely delicate features. Slurp. "Am I in heaven?" asked Sam. "Certainly," cooed a voice like velvet, "and I'm Bambi's mother." Sam picked up his head and looked around. Ancient bricks oozing water and slime covered his head. Curved over his head. Black rusted bars stretched across in front of him. A round dungeon-like space lay beyond, bathed in a familiar misty blue light. He could hear music and voices somewhere, echoing through the watery tunnels. No, this is not heaven. "Actually, my name is Madam, and you're still in Vermont, 50 feet below it." "Why are you licking my face?" said Sam. "Because it's such a cute one. I'm also tidying it up." Sam realized his head didn't throb with pain anymore. With a paw, he felt that the bullet's gaping cut on his scalp had been sewn shut and dried blood was gone. A needle and thread lay nearby on the filthy floor. Madam shrugged. I've gotten quite good with that. Sam rose unsteadily and walked toward the bars to look out. A crumbling spiral staircase descended from the darkness above. A single beam of pale moonlight found its way down from some distant filthy window. In the middle of the round brick room sat a single old desk with piles of paper, a video player, and a small TV on top, the source of the blue light that flickered across the bricks. I don't know, I can't remember if that's Madam or if that's Madam's handiwork, but there's a dog. A sign on the desk said, "Adoption forms here." 7 dogs piled on and around a single chair in the dark, watching the tiny screen. They turned their heads to look at Sam and said in chorus, "Evening." Then they turned back to the old movie playing on the TV. Sam noticed that his cage door was open. He moved out toward the desk. One of the dogs turned to Sam and said in a hushed, excited voice, "It's the last scene, so great. Lassie was taken from her little boy and sold and sent away, then escaped and spent months lost and crossing the country, struggling to get home, and she's nearly dead and crawling to his school where the little boy has come out and spotted her." Sam looked at the screen. He watched the boy in the movie run to the filthy, wounded collie and embrace her. "Lassie, you've come home," he said. The mesmerized dogs erupted in a cascade of mournful howling and sobs, making Sam jump. They turned to each other and hugged happily. One gargantuan beast turned to Sam, wiped a tear, and said, "Such a good flick." "How many times have you seen it?" asked Sam, wide-eyed. The dogs looked at each other. One started counting on his paws. "Well, let's see. Every night for how long, Blue?" "Years," said the dog next to him, a blue pit bull with lavender spots and chartreuse ears. Trying to figure out which one he is. As an astonished Sam moved closer to them, he suddenly realized that they were the 7 most ridiculous dogs he had ever seen. The 7 most ridiculous anything he had ever seen. "Meet the neighbors, Pilgrim," said Madam, pointing to the biggest one, indistinguishable from a furry rhinoceros. "This is Tusk. His love of mailman is a one-way affair." A terrier mix the size of a yard mole stepped forward. "Wee Willie," said Madam. "Willie liked to lick noses, alas, from the inside." A nearly hairless mutt walked out with a face overwhelmed with wrinkles, piano wire hair, and bulging eyeballs. "Here's Bug," said Madam, "an underappreciated beauty." The blue pit bull mix stood up, the color of gummy bears. "Dear sweet old Blue. She clashed with her last owner's couch. She actually clashes with all couches." "Fabio, stand up, please," urged Madam. Fabio, a lanky greyhound pointer beagle mix of some sort, did exactly that, standing on his 2 rear legs, which was good, since he had no front legs whatsoever. "Fabio was born missing some things, but not a healthy self-image." A basset mix ambled out, tripping over jowls that draped like beach towels. "Here's Jeeves. Very important that he avoids breezes." And then, finally, we have Poofed. "Come out, dear." A tiny black curly-haired mutt hopped forward. Sam stared. Seemed normal. "Wait," said Madam. Suddenly, a 3-foot flame rocketed out of his exhaust port, accompanied by the sound of an old Chrysler backfiring. Poofed shot forward and hit the wall next to Sam. Behind, all the papers from the desk had blown off, leaving a few singed and smoking with a faint odor lingering in the air of, thankfully, French toast. Poofed looked at Sam, somewhat embarrassed. "Bad kibble," he said. Sam stared at the dogs, perplexed. "What breeds are you?" The dogs glanced at each other, confused. "We're dogs," said Madam. "What kind?" said Sam. Madam thought. "With skin," she said, satisfied. Sam looked at them in horror. "Where am I?" Then he knew. "Wait, I've heard about these places. It's the scary bedtime stories that dog parents tell their puppies about that they'll end up if they're not clean or groomed or perfect." Sam looked at the bars with disgust. "The This is a dog pound. Madam moved in closer toward Sam. No, 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 handsome. It's not just any dog pound. It's the country's worst. It's where they send the hopeless cases. It's the end of the road, the unholiest of the unholy, the National Last-Ditch Dog Depository. And you are the newest depositee. Sam looked stunned, then angry. I'm no depositee. I'm an Australian red dachshund. The dogs looked back at him politely. I have a Douglas tuft, said Sam. Fabio stood on his only 2 legs, cleared his throat, and struck a pose. Sam looked around frantically. I gotta get back home. Which way is out? Madam pointed up the spiral stairs. Sam dashed up several and then stopped. The door's not locked, said Madam. Sam looked surprised. Madam smiled slightly. They know we won't leave. We don't want to. Then what do you want? Why, to be taken. Sam frowned and turned to go higher. He stopped again and looked down at Madam. Come with me. You're not like those others. You're perfect. Madam reached up with the paw, pushing off her fake, expertly sewn dog muzzle made of leather and snipped fur, revealing the snubbed flat nose of a cat. Nobody's perfect, she purred. So remember, the name of the book is Flawed Dogs. So we got a dog with a cat face. We got a dog with really big cheeks or jowls. We've got the Poofed, the one with the gas. We've got the polka-dotted green pit bull. We got the bulging-eyed guy with the mole that likes to clean noses from the inside. We got a rhinoceros-type dog. We got a dog with no front legs. Sam dashed out of the ancient... Chapter 17, Betrayed. Sam dashed out of the ancient fort and into the frigid night. He looked back to see a series of crumbling walls hewn from massive red granite. It looked like what it was. A forgotten prison from a long-ago war, rotting in a frozen marsh. A sign leaning from the wind read, Adoptions on Tuesdays, 1 p.m. to 1:15 p.m. Someone had scratched out the times with a marker, scrawling underneath, Don't bother. Where was he? The hills looked familiar. He was at the edge of a familiar city. He sniffed the freezing air. 1,000 scents flooded in, but it wasn't difficult picking out the smoldering alder wood in the fireplace of Hamish's upstairs study. He sniffed. Home was about 5 miles away, maybe 4. He'd followed the river. As Sam started off, he looked back at the gloomy stone citadel from which he had just emerged. Won't be coming back here, he thought. Back inside and below the old fort, down in its darkest recesses, the homeless, unwanted lost dogs of the National Last-Ditch Dog Depository pushed the start button on the VCR and huddled together as Lassie Come Home started again. Madam looked up the winding stairs that the strange new dachshund had just ascended. The others noticed her looked at her. Then, on cue, they all said in a chorus, He'll be back. Staying to the shadows of the riverbank, Sam ran west. He would find Heidi, and she would somehow understand that everything was a mistake. That it was Cassius, not he, that was the danger. Breathing hard, Sam loped through the fresh snow, lit brightly by a newly emerged moon. His head throbbed as he reached a low draw in the hills where the wall crossed a stream, now frozen. A large drainpipe emerged below the stonework, the way he and Heidi would sneak out of the estate when she was supposed to be doing her chores. Sam stepped into darkness. He froze at a familiar voice in the blackness inches from his face. They say poodles are the smartest breed. Alas, dear departed. Sam, 'tis true. Sam broke from the pipe, startled. Cassius emerged into the moonlight and stood over the dachshund, now balanced awkwardly in the rocks of the frozen stream. Move aside, said Sam, regaining his composure. Poor, beautiful, perfect Sam the lion. You're Heidi. She doesn't love you now, dear boy. Let's review. Cassius thought carefully, fluffing the curled fur around his ankles with his lips. Imperfect, sick, violent, ugly. The words cut into Sam and found purchase in a mind still trying to make sense of the senseless. But he raised his head higher. Move, Cassius. She still wants me. No, she has me now, said the poodle. The words stung Sam as if they had slapped him. The terrible truth behind the unspeakable events of the day came tumbling down upon Sam, and he grew dizzy. Everything had been a cruel hoax. Cassius was never after the baby. He was after him. "Move away, Cassius," said Sam, desperation edging into his voice. "You're not clear on this, Dachshund. She doesn't want you now. You're not the perfect dog you were." Sam looked at his reflection in the ice. A filthy, ripped face looked back. Blood still caked to his fur. "I will be again," said Sam. But Cassius already stepping toward him, the perfectly combed balls of poodle fur blocking the moonlight and casting Sam into the shadow. Sam stepped back while Cassius lowered his head, stared intently, and spoke low, each terrible word falling from his mouth with a rolling puff of steam into the frigid air. There he is, talking. See the drip? The steam. "You know, dear Sam, some believe that for the dirty, unwanted, broken, stray mongrels of the world, there is a guardian angel. I think that must be true. Those lesser dogs have nobody else, do they? Nobody but an angel would want them. They say she's quite beautiful, descending down a glimmering beam of blue light when death arrives, offering the flawed, unwanted souls a second chance. I think it's time you met her." Cassius again stepped toward Sam, who again stepped backward. "I'm not unwanted," Sam said, his voice rising, "and I'm not flawed." Cassius smiled oddly and forced Sam backward another inch. "Yes, you are." At that precise moment, Sam's left rear foot stepped back onto the trigger plate of an open steel leg trap, freshly set from the winter beaver season. The jagged metal jaws came together several inches above Sam's foot, crushing the bone, the sound echoing off the Vermont hills like a rifle shot. Sam rolled onto his back, reflexively kicking the air, his mouth flying open in a tortured howl of pain, swallowed up by the cruel silence of the falling snow in a day at long last exhausted of heartbreak. There's a picture, kind of, you have to look carefully. There's a picture of the trap. All right. And that is where I'll stop for the day. I wonder what's going to happen. All right. See you later.